Hi, I'm Brendan, and welcome to Personality Epistemology. So I'm experimenting here, and I welcome you to jump in and see what I can come up with for this video. I don't really have a plan here, so I'm doing these layouts and layout arrangements, and I'm trying to distill like a number of elements that I've pulled together at different times. And basically, the theme here is life as story. And so what I had in mind for this video is to tell about my life story. And that could be done in different ways. And I'm going to see how I can do this. So I was born in 1980, and there's this term Xennial that describes sort of the in-between space between Gen X and millennials, and I find this meaningful because I never really identified with, certainly not Gen X, and not really any generation, and I'm kind of like meta-generational. I consider myself meta-generational in terms of these generational descriptions. My dad is a cultural anthropologist, and I have this photo of myself as a baby with my dad here that next to the video that my mom took. And I find that interesting, kind of like if you've seen the movie The Truman Show, there's this whole thing of being born into basically a studio, and it's kind of the Platonic cave trope, kind of like The Matrix and so on. So in terms of life as story, throughout my life I've been interested in pursuing knowledge, and I have not found formal education to be a good place to pursue knowledge for the most part. And these days, I find it almost like shocking that so many people are doing formal education when there are all these other ways to find knowledge and information. And yet there's so much, it's like, where do you begin? So part of what I've done is tried to distill what are the essentials to know, what are some essential concepts and ways of looking at things, and doing so from the perspective that the future can play out in different ways. The past is the past. History is an arrow, like it goes backward to forward. As some song lyric goes, hands on the clock only turn one way. So throughout my life, I've periodically reflected on where I'm at and so on, and I've pursued living liminally. There's there are a number of talks about this, but there's one that's called, I'll put a link in the description, it's Leading in Liminal Places, I think it's called. So I think that's a good introduction to liminality and living liminally, like pausing, asking why, reflecting, why do people do things the way they do? And then this overlaps with anthropology. So I've kind of grown up with this sort of anthropological viewpoint. There's this concept of participant observation in a foreign culture, and to me, all culture is foreign, and it's also just all human. So it's not foreign in that sense. I mean, it's a mix. I welcome engagement, participation, comments, questions, and I encourage others to try doing some of what I'm doing. And part of how I came to do these layouts is with this approach of free writing, partly inspired by the book The Artist's Way, A Spiritual Path to Higher Creativity, and partly inspired by Carl Jung and how he developed the framework that became Myers-Briggs and Personality YouTube through a lot of inner work and also mandala sequences, drawing mandalas and as representation of the self and kind of evolving them. And yet Carl Jung, there's something about his overall approach that it's a little bit too into mysticism and too into, I mean, I embrace that element of life, but I'm also very interested in objective knowledge, and by objective, I don't mean the same thing that is commonly meant to be or I mean, it's a little messy talking about objective reality and objective knowledge, but the idea is that drawing on reflexivity, self-reflection, and so on, we can only know, or our starting point for knowing is our own experiences. But then through learning from and with others, and a variety of different approaches to figuring things out and learning and reflecting and so on, I have this understanding that it's possible to develop quite a comprehensive understanding of a lot of things, even though it's incremental and it's a matter of piecing together puzzles and so on. It's kind of how I look at it. So it might help if I do some of these layouts live on camera, but what's represented in this layout is, like above where my video image is here, I have lyrics from Queen and David Bowie, Under Pressure, and a reference to Billy Joel's song Pressure, and I relate a lot to the song Surface Pressure. And yet, but I take a different standpoint than Surface Pressure, because that's based so much on one person taking on all this pressure without the freedom and joy and so on. And so I've pursued my life in such a way where I've developed a sense of freedom by pursuing not getting stuck in situations that I have a problem with. I mean, it's kind of led me to a situation that, I mean, there's always constraints, but I'm in a situation where I'm basically helping to coordinate survivable circumstances for people who are close to me and figuring this out for others too, because way too many people are dying and way too many people are suffering and stuck. And like there's a current situation in the U.S. At the southern border, and of course beyond the U.S., but like a refugee crisis and huge political clashes over this that are not getting to any of the root issues from what I can see. So, I mean, the way I look at it is I think that these cyclical theories of history are helpful, and that humanity is at a point of a number, kind of the end or in-between spaces of a number of cycles, historical cycles. And I've kind of spent my life waiting for this. I mean, not just waiting, but like this sort of center-lower image of me in 2011 in front of a sign that's in front of a New York Public Library. The sign says "Find the Future," and then further up, top center area of the screen, it says "Find the Future." This is a game developed by Jane McGonigal, and when I found that, I was like, this is so cool, because this is what I want to do, is learn about the past and see what can be done to co-create the future. So and that now is certainly a time when co-creating the future is necessary for humanity and happening. So, and it's happening live. And I think this is applicable anything from people sorting out their own futures or wayfinding, or what steps to take next in life, through kind of macro questions of economics and politics and so on, geopolitics. So, and I basically have the idea that knowledge is helpful and relevant to figuring out what to do. And the culture, as I grew up with and understood it in the US and so on, knowledge was really treated in many contexts as almost irrelevant, or the kind of knowledge that was considered valuable is like just doing what you're supposed to do, or socially constructed knowledge. But then my viewpoint is it's possible that if you're dealing with socially constructed knowledge, at least figure out where it came from, which committee designed it, or which people talking to each other, or which series of things happening to produce press, news, and media, and so on. And so, I mean, anyway, so key concept here is anticipation, and where to begin. I mean, I have this whole slew of references, articles, and so on that I want to share, but then I can just pour out article titles. But it's like, so basically I have the material to produce a class, and I would like to facilitate an interactive, YouTube-based, and it can be other social media and so on too, but sort of an interactive class/story. And I want to welcome people to participate, co-participate, along the lines of Jeff Gomez defined this idea of a collective journey. And basically humanity has a collective journey at this point, and whatever amount any one person's story and the story of people they're directly interacting with relates to everyone else varies, but it's like we live in a very fragmented world where a lot of people are not talking to each other, a lot of groups are not talking to each other, or it's very talking past each other, and I want to step back and actually figure out how to co-create viable, worthwhile futures for everyone possible. And that's in part the individual choices and so on of each person, but then it's in a context. So, where to begin, or where to go next? Okay, so on the hand-drawn center right layout here, in the lower left corner of that, it says Start Anywhere. There's a thing that you can dive in anywhere and figure out how different things connect to each other and end up getting to more of a sort of holistic, whole story lens on things. So this gets into, however, or whatever, when one is taking on responsibility. So, okay, so with this immigration thing, for example, a lot of people comment, like the U.S. cannot take on responsibility for everyone in the world. And the way I'm coming at this from an anthropological and sort of a learning facilitator standpoint is, and a public health standpoint, is drawing on different disciplines. I am seeking to not take responsibility, well, take responsibility to some degree for seeing what I can contribute that could be useful for others. And it kind of goes with Sarah McLachlan's song "World on Fire," and it's like I watch the heavens, but I've found no calling, and something I can do to change what's coming as the sky is falling. So I've found a calling, or a number of interrelated callings, and it has to do with like learning facilitation as having gone through life where formal education hasn't given me the answers, even with more and more and more answers and knowledge available, it's still like it's helpful for somebody to produce curriculum or sort out a learning experience or something like that, similar to classes. But then what each person will find relevant and interesting and all that varies. So that's where I'm looking to facilitate an interactive approach to live story related learning, and interactive with people who would like to participate with this and however they can. And then I have this image that says brain development itself has been changing for decades, from this video about teens in crisis. And it's not just teens that are in crisis, all these professions are in crisis, all kinds of people are in something like crisis or liminal states or liminal situations where the future could play out differently depending on what they do, but then how do you sort of decide what to do? And many people are in situations where they're kind of stuck, like what now, like this Find the Future 2011 photo of me. It's kind of like at that point I was like, what next? I was completely like, I had no idea what next in my life, and or very little idea. I figured it probably maybe had something, it would involve people I know, and meeting new people, but and then I have a reference to this article which I highly recommend, Autoethnography and the Medium of the Comic Book. I'd like to cite where I got all these images, but I'll have to figure out how to do that. And this book, Epistemic Fluency in Professional Education, Innovation, Knowledgeable Action, and Actionable Knowledge, that's also very in line with how I look at things and everything. I was thinking to tell my life story with this video, or produce maybe several videos where I talk through my life story. But it basically, like, I wrote this thing in 2021, where it's like when I was younger, I described how when I was younger, I found myself in a knowledge vacuum. Like wherever I could seek or find knowledge or figure things out, I felt like most of the time I was not actively learning or learning the things I needed to learn, and I didn't even know what a lot of them were. And at this point I have collected like a whole 360 view of things that matter and I think are relevant to know, and so I'm interested to share that. Anyway, but so because I'm in the situation of coordinating survival for some people I know and trying to figure this out for others whose lives are on the line, from a sort of population health perspective, but also like accompaniment approach. It's like accompaniment as a concept of staying with someone for an extended period of time and helping figure things out. And so I'm looking at myself in terms of humanity as a whole with that. It's unclear, how much I can participate or help with what. And these days there's so much knowledge out there. Other people are piecing this stuff together too, so it's not just me, but a lot of people don't have access to life-relevant knowledge, or knowledge that could, they probably have some, but many people don't have all the life-relevant knowledge that could help them optimize their navigating life from that point forward, or at that point. And like, for example, Kevin Smith recently had a psychological breakdown or whatever, and learned a bunch about trauma, and recorded a video about that. And he was saying on this other video or whatever, that he had not known anything about trauma before that, and he wanted to share that. And I mean, there's so much knowledge and stuff, but a lot of people just do not encounter. Like, I find myself with YouTube or other things, it's so easy to get to just not have, like, how would you even find most of the stuff that's out there if you don't know the keywords to search for or whatever. And so I've done a lot of this, trying to research all these problems I keep encountering. Like, I mean, one of the current ones being with many people, I'm finding that, and I think this is widespread. There's like a, even though there's so much knowledge and content, like many people are less and less open to just having conversations, and I think it's partly the overwhelm. And so anyway, I welcome dialogue. I'm especially interested in connecting with the personality YouTube community, and sort of how can we go beyond the hero's journey and have it more connected to what often is associated with religion, of actually helping people that one doesn't know. But like, where do you even begin? There's so many possible things to do, and I think that kind of mapping out needs is one of the key things that can help facilitate that, because the current economy, so many people's time is so disconnected from meeting their own or other people's needs, because it's like either being stuck or being overwhelmed. Like, a lot of these jobs with helping professions, for example, are not really optimally helping people because of how they're structured. And so I think that creating some new roles for doing professional helping work is relevant here, and that's what I'm working on. And I invite others to help figure out along with me. And then that gets into this whole thing of moral injury, moral distress, and triage. Like, how do you decide who to help? And so, but then, so I think that there could be more of a process of identifying needs, and especially where the future could play out different ways for somebody, coordinating the help that could help transform situations and make for better futures. So comments welcome, and more soon. Thank you.